I'm speaking with Morgan's chief economist, Michael Knox. Michael, thanks for your time. Today I'd like to ask you about three characters that are either shaping the current market or have potential to shape our market. We're talking about Janet Yellen, Mario Draghi and Donald Trump today. First on Janet Yellen, there was some very dovish comments made out of the Fed this week in the US. What's your take on the situation for US interest rates?
Well, Janet Yellen gave a very interesting speech to the New York Economic Club. And she really talked about two things. She talked about where equilibrium real short rates should be, where the level of real short rates should be to stabilise full employment in the US economy. And she noted that that equilibrium level had been drifting down, over the last 20 years or so, and now it was around about zero. So that told us that the kind of Fed funds rate that we're going to get to at the end of the cycle, because the Fed wants to keep full employment in the US economy, is only around about 2%, because if they are targeting 2% inflation and there's a real short rate of zero, then the final Fed funds rate winds up at about 2%. And that then means exactly what she was saying in the speech, that the Fed funds rate only needs to go up gradually to get to that really what is quite a low target. But the second thing she said was about inflation. How the Fed measures inflation is in terms of the core personal consumption deflator. And that's moved up to 1.7% now, and their target is 2%. And the view is that as it's moving up towards their target, that supports the view that they should be lifting rates in the near term. But very interestingly, she said that she doubted that rate of increase of inflation would continue, and it might go down in the short term before going up again. All of this reinforces the view that the rate at which the Fed will be tightening interest rates will be extremely gradual, what she said, and that gives markets a much more optimistic outlook.
Sure. Moving on to Europe, you wrote during the month that the latest round of stimulus out of the ECB was akin to a bazooka. Can you describe your thinking there, and are the European markets out of the woods?
I think I even said more than that, Tom. I think I said it was nuclear weapons grade, much bigger than a bazooka. And what happened here was that, the problem that the ECB is facing is they actually have negative inflation. So inflation is about minus 0.3 of 1%. So that means they've been too slow in acting in terms of introducing quantitative easing. So what they did was they increased the quantity of QE from 60 billion euros a month to 80 billion euros a month. And as well as that, they cut the ECB deposit rate from minus 0.3% to minus 0.4. Now we actually calculate they're still behind the curve on this, because it should actually be about minus 1.3%. That's because they've got very high unemployment, it's above 10%, and they've got very low inflation, it's actually in negative territory. So they should have been moving earlier. But that kind of expansion demonstrates a real commitment to getting inflation up again. And they've said that they'll continue that policy of large quantitative easing until inflation hits their target of 2%. And on their forecasts, that's not going to happen until 2019. So here we are, we've had dramatic expansion of quantitative easing, and it's going to continue that way for at least another 3 years. That's an enormous horizon of continued stimulus by the European Central Bank.
Sure, and finally, Donald Trump is polarising the electorate perhaps and markets alike in the US. Is a Donald Trump presidency a risk or an opportunity for markets?
Well, Donald Trump has been looked at by economic historians, and it's been suggested that Donald Trump is a populist. populists were common at the end of the 19th century, when we were going through a very deflationary period, which was, many people said was caused by the gold standard. There wasn't enough money around, there wasn't enough expansion of money around, and the most famous populist in the US at the end of the 19th century was a guy called William Jennings Bryan, who was the Democratic candidate, in fact, for presidency in 1895. He was nominated in 85, 80 of the presidency in 1896, which was won by William McKinley. But if we look at what populism is in the US concept, no populist has really ever been elected US president. And if Trump was elected, it would be the first one. Populists are against free trade, so they tend to want high tariffs on imports, and that generates a switch towards domestic product, and actually works very well for a short period of time, but in the end the economy becomes uncompetitive. Populists are against high immigration, and Trump famously wants to build a wall on the Mexican border and have the Mexicans pay for it. The problem with limiting immigration is in the short term it allows real wages to rise, but in the long term you don't have the labour force and the skilled labour that you need to keep the economy growing. So both of these policies are policies which are good in the short term, but bad in the long term. In addition to that, populists have tended to, where they've been elected in South American countries, to expand the budget deficit so they can provide favours for the people who elected them. So what you've got is a combination of economic policies which would, if he was elected, he would be successful in the short term, but an enormous long-term cost for the US economy. Fortunately, the polls have him losing the election currently by 11% of the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. So we may just get lucky. We may never have the opportunity to find out.
Excellent. As always, plenty to watch out for. Michael, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tom.